Pope Francis made a whirlwind visit to the revered Catholic shrine of Fatima in Portugal,
where Virgin Mary appeared to 3 shepherd children in 1917. They said she gave them 3 messages.
And a third secret more recently revealed to be the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II, which happened on May 13, 1981.
As we approach the 110th anniversary of the apparitions of Our Lady of Fatima, the current global situation continues to push many to demand clearer explanations of the third secret of Fatima that she benevolently shared with the 3 young shepherds in 1917. With a clear understanding of his papal position in the midst of these prophecies, Pope Francis has finally revealed some truths about the third secret of Fatima. What is the significance of these truths to humanity's future? What significance do these papal revelations hold, and how can we respond to them? Join us in this video as we unravel everything you need to know.
On May the 13th, 1917, in Cova de Iria, 3 children were tending their flock of sheep when they witnessed the supernatural apparition of a beautiful young lady.
Lucia, Jacinta, and Francisco were given the secrets of Fatima on July 13, 1917, but it was kept secret until July 1941, when Sister Lucia shared the first 2 secrets as directed by the bishop. Much later, Saint Lucia revealed the third of the secrets that have led to various controversies since its release. Now the Pope has shared some profound revelations on the secrets to guide us on what is next. Before we delve into the details of what the Pope shared, let's explore some details about how the secrets came to be. Custodians of the secrets of the Fatima. The secret of the Fatima was revealed to 3 children on the 13th of May in 1917. They were young shepherds of Aljustrel village, somewhere around Fatima in Portugal. While they tended some of their flocks at the Cova da Iria, they experienced something unusual. It was about noon. They had just finished reciting the rosary, and they decided to have a playtime building little stone houses. At the time, these 3 cousin shepherds were aged 10, 9, and, respectively. The first was Lucius de Jesus, and her cousins, Francisco and Jacinto. These 3 children had a spectacular experience when a great light suddenly appeared before them. It wasn't familiar, and they made to leave because the only thing their little minds could relate to it was that the bright light was lightning. Then again, another flash of light appeared in the clearing before them, and this time, a lady described as brighter than the sun appeared before them, just above a small holm oak. She had a white rosary hanging from her hands, and she began to speak to them. Now, what did she tell them? The lady wanted them to come to the Cova de Iria on every 13th day of the month for the next 5 months. The children went back in the first 3 months, but after they began sharing their experience of the lady's visit with others, they were believed to be telling lies. This made the mayor of Nova de Urem take them away in a bid to make them confess that they were lying. Outside the designated meeting site with the lady, they had another unexpected apparition while grazing their flock in Valinhos, another village about 500 meters from their village on August 19th.
The earliest known apparition of the Virgin Mary isn't quite an apparition at all. It's more a bilocation. Our Lady appeared while she was still living.
Subsequently, they returned to the Cova de Iria on the 13th of September and October. By the last visit, the news of the apparitions had spread, and about 70,000 people were present on the last day to experience the apparition with them. In the presence of the people, the lady told the children that she was Our Lady of the Rosary and requested that they build a chapel in her honor right on that site. This chapel was built and named the Chapel of the Apparitions and is still on the site. But did this happen on mere accounts of the children's experience? Absolutely not. Most people didn't believe them. At that time, about 30,000 people gathered to experience the apparition as the children claimed. This made the Blessed Lady promise the children that a miracle would happen the next month so that all who doubted would believe them. In fulfillment of this, after a rainy day, they saw the sun emerge behind the clouds like a disk, bright with various beautiful colors that were easy to look at. which was, in itself, a miracle, as no one can look at the sun shining with such intensity without it being a miracle. After this, it spun like a fireball, as though it would fall to the ground for 10 minutes. This nearly unbelievable miracle was witnessed by thousands of people, and it became known as the miracle of the sun.
Everybody was saying that if the miracle did not happen, the whole family would die. And so he stayed home. He was afraid. And because he was afraid to die, he wasn't there when the miracle of the sun occurred.
These experiences led to the acceptance of the first, second, and third secrets of Fatima that the lady shared with the children. So, what were these secrets? You're about to find out. Unveiling the secrets of Fatima. While 3 children received the secrets from the lady, only one of them was able to share what the lady said to them. Shortly after the apparition experience, something devastating happened in Fatima, leaving only Sister Lucia to recount the secrets that the lady had shared with her and her cousins. Francisco and Jacinta had died 1 year apart from each other due to the outbreak of the flu in Fatima. Although severely ill, Francisco spent most of his years after the vision offering his life as a penance to console the Lord, despite his health. Jacinta also suffered a similar fate as she spent her time praying and offering her sufferings for praying for peace in the world, the unsaved, and the Holy Father. When they died, in 1919 and 1920 respectively, Francisco was initially buried in the parish cemetery, and Jacinta was buried in her family tomb and later interred at the parish cemetery. By 1930, the Catholic Church declared that the miracle of the sun was worthy of belief. Later, in 1952, a tomb was prepared in the basilica at Cova da Iria, where they were buried to the right and left of the main altar respectively. They became beatified in 1979, and they were declared venerable by Pope John Paul II on the 13th of May, 1989. Lucia, on the other hand, survived the flu, and by 1921, she joined the College of Villar and was sent to Tuy. She made her confession as a nun on October 3, 1934. 7 years later, she wrote in her memoir, The Secret of the Fatima, that she received alongside her late cousins over 2 decades earlier. Now, let's look at the first secret. The first secret was a sea of fire that the lady showed them. It seemed to be beneath the earth, and she saw souls and demons in the fire. They were floating in the blazing fire like transparent burning embers. The flames of the fire made them rise into the air and fall back without weight, yet amidst shrieks and groans of pain. The souls had a human form, but the demons looked terrifying like unknown animals and were black yet transparent. She described the sight as terrifying. After this vision lasted, the lady made them know that there was something that could be done to save many souls from going to hell, for wars to end, and for peace to reign. She told them that this would happen if people stopped offending God, but if not, something worse would happen. Truly, the fulfillment of her requests marked the end of the First World War, which was currently raging at the time. The lady shared the second secret with the children, telling them to devote themselves to her immaculate heart. It made the children so happy knowing that her heart would be their refuge and lead them to God. They would often sing happily while picking wildflowers, calling on Sweet Mary to be their salvation, convert sinners, and save their souls from hell.
Buonasera.
As a leader of the Catholic Church, it is expected that the Pope upholds traditional church doctrine. But with Pope Francis, the case is different.
Francis is the first pope from the Americas, the first of his name, and more than any other pope in recent memory, has dedicated his life and ministry to the poor, the peripheral, and the forgotten.
As instead, he has been challenging and reforming these beliefs, an act that has earned him more hate, direct attacks, opposition, and backlash from the leadership of the Church.
Protecting a pope who wants to be accessible to the public is never an easy task. Unlike other world leaders who are very conscious of their threat, the Pope feels that it's part of his mission to be a man of the people, especially this Pope.
Pope Francis, as we all know, is undoubtedly one of the most controversial popes in history who isn't scared of shaking things up in the Church.
His Holiness Pope Francis of the Vatican.
The first pope in history to travel to Bahrain.
قداسة البابا فرانسيس بابا الفاتيكان. His Holiness Pope Francis of the Vatican.
His attempt and approach towards the Church Reformation have been so outlandish that, at some point, his beliefs were questioned, and he was heavily accused of being heretic. Newsflash, he's at it again. As in a recent event, he was found making some really terrifying revelations about Jesus and the Bible. What did he say, and why is it raising this much dust in the Christian community? Let's find out. Pope Francis and the controversies surrounding him. On May 21, 2018, Juan Carlos Cruz, a courageous whistleblower who was a victim of Chile's shocking clergy sex abuse scandal, had the chance to meet with Pope Francis himself at the Vatican.
This is a big story. A whistleblower in Chile's clerical sexual abuse scandal, which was huge, covered up, and disgusting.
During their private conversations, Cruz openly shared with the Pope about his homosexuality. He went further to tell the Holy Father how the bishops back home in Chile had shamefully tried to use his sexual orientation against him in a cruel attempt to discredit his testimony, an act that took a heavy toll, causing him immense pain. But guess what Pope Francis's response to him was? Juan Carlos, that you are gay does not matter. God made you like this and loves you like this, and I don't care. The Pope loves you like this. You have to be happy with who you are.
They had painted me in such a perverse that I was just this And I said, Holy Father, I'm not a saint, but I certainly want to be a good person. And he said, Juan Carlos, God made you like this. God loves you like this. The Pope loves you like this, and you should love yourself.
In yet another remarkable instance, the Pope sent a letter of appreciation to an American nun who has dedicated the past 50 years of her life to ministering to LGBTQ Catholics, and who over 20 years ago was investigated and threatened with being barred from her sacred work for standing up for the LGBTQ community. Are you surprised he did this? Well, you're not the only one who feels this way. Many people, especially the leadership of the Catholic Church, were shocked to their core and left dumbfounded when they heard the report so much that the Vatican refused to give an official statement either to debunk, affirm, or address the statement. But guess what? This is not the first time he's made controversial statements that have shaken the church leadership. But his recent revelation about Jesus and the Bible was so terrifying. However, before revealing what he said, let's give a little backstory about the Pope and his controversiality. While the Catholic Church has had some really notoriously controversial popes in the past, such as Pope Alexander VI, who flouted his sacred vows by taking multiple mistresses and fathering many children, Pope Stephen VI, who went as far as to exhume the corpse of his predecessor, put the dead man on trial, and then have his body mutilated and dumped into the Tiber River, Pope Leo X, whose lavish spending on Renaissance artworks caused great outrage, Pope John XIV, whose adultery transformed the papal palace into a brothel, Pope Sergius III, who purportedly had a rival candidate for the papacy assassinated to secure his election, and Pope Benedict XVI, known for his violent tendencies. The controversy and backlash faced by these earlier pontiffs are nothing compared to those Pope Francis in the relatively short time since he ascended to the throne, and the reasons for that are pretty obvious. Starting from his appointment, everything about him and how he came to power deviated from the norms of the Catholic Church. Before he came into power, the Catholic Church only gave appointments to candidates who were strictly from Europe. But after the resignation of his predecessor, Pope Benedict, the papacy gathered, and for the first time, they picked someone from North America. As if this deviation wasn't enough, they chose someone from a conservative group called the Jesuits. For clarity, the Jesuits are a group of Catholics who are part of a religious order called the Society of Jesus. They were founded a long time ago, in the 16th century, by a man named Saint Ignatius of Loyola. They are known for being very dedicated to education, missionary work, and deep thinking about religious and philosophical ideas. For a long time, the Jesuits were not considered for any leadership position in the Catholic Church, especially that of the Pope. This was because some other Catholic leaders and groups were suspicious of the Jesuits. They worried the Jesuits might try to gain too much power and influence over the Pope and the whole Church. Some people also thought the Jesuits were too focused on academics and book learning, instead of focusing enough on the Church's everyday practical work. Other Catholic groups, like the Franciscans and Dominicans, also didn't want the Jesuits to have too much control. They wanted to ensure the Church's power and influence was spread out, not all going to the Jesuits. But then, in 2013, all of that changed. For the very first time, to the astonishment of Catholics, Francis was chosen to be the Pope. This was really surprising because it broke from the long tradition of not picking Jesuits for this important job. What happened? Well, over time, the Jesuits had become more accepted and respected within the Catholic Church. The group of cardinals who chose the Pope felt that Francis's own personal qualities and leadership style were exactly what the Church needed at that time. So they were willing to look past the old concerns about the Jesuits and chose one of them to be the Pope. But less than a year after his appointment, they started to question their decisions because yes, he did turn things over, but not in the way they wanted it. When Pope Francis took office, he really shook things up both in the Catholic Church and the world government. He started challenging and going against some of the core traditional beliefs that the Church had held for a very long time. One of the first things he went after that riled up the Church the most was his controversial teachings about how the Church should be, particularly focusing on the Church's focus on personal morality and strict theological rules. He criticized the economic systems that allow so much inequality to exist and said the Church needed to care more for the poor and fight for the marginalized people in society. He wanted the Church to be more focused on real-world social justice issues instead of just telling people how to live their personal lives. Not stopping there, his next point of interest was with issues that were bothering the environment. Previous popes hadn't really cared about things like climate change and protecting the planet, but when Francis came in, he issued a significant document calling on the Church to be a leader in environmental stewardship, saying that the Church had a responsibility to speak up and take action on these critical issues. To the dismay of the Church leadership, he also worked to decentralize power and authority within the Church. Instead of everything being tightly controlled from the top, he gave more autonomy and decision-making power to local bishops around the world, creating a big change from the very hierarchical and centralized way the Church had operated for a long time. It was a significant shift that surprised many people in the Church. Increasing the tension, in a speech he gave during Christmas in 2014, he said some really important things that went against how the Church had traditionally operated. One of the problems he tackled was something called clericalism. Clericalism is when the priests and other clergy in the Church start to think they are more important and powerful than everyone else. Displeased, Pope Francis said this is like a disease, like leprosy, that is really hurting the Church. Then, he went on telling the Church leaders, especially those working in the Vatican, to get rid of the 14 bad habits and temptations, like feeling indispensable, wanting to be rich, living a double life, and even forgetting about God. His reason for saying this was born out of his desire to see a massive change in the Church, as he wanted her to be more focused on serving the people instead of the leaders' power and wealth. Doubling down on that, he dropped a bombshell when he said he saw the Church like an upside-down pyramid, with the regular members, the regular people, as the most important, and the Pope and bishops as the less important, as he wanted the Church to be a place where everyone works together, not just the leaders telling everyone what to do. In another instance that bewildered the Church leaders, he asked that priests give communion to women who had previously had abortions. Then, the most shocking was when he said trying to convert everyone to Catholicism wasn't right, that there is nothing like a particular Catholic God, but that there's only one true God.
Do you wish to offer yourself to God, to endure all the suffering He may please to send you, to help atone for the sins by which He is offended, and to ask for the conversion of sinners?
She made them understand that God intended to establish the world's devotion to her Immaculate Heart. She promised to be with them always and comfort them and lead them to God through her heart. She guaranteed them that her immaculate heart would triumph in the end, ensuring that they were facing the route to heaven. She shared with the seers that a worse war would break out during the pontificate of Pius V. She also gave them a sign to prove it. They would see an unknown light illuminating a night as a sign that God was about to punish the world with wars, famine, and persecution for all of its crimes. The only way to prevent this from happening was to consecrate Russia to her Immaculate Heart and offer the communion of reparation on the first Saturdays. Upon heeding her request, peace would be restored and Russia would be converted. Without this, the world could expect wars, persecutions of the Church, and martyrdoms. If the Holy Father consecrated Russia to him, the world would enjoy a period of peace, she said. Now that we have the first two secrets, let's move to the last one, the third secret of Fatima. When Lucia shared the third secret, she wrote it in a sealed envelope because although she was compelled to share it by her bishop, she didn't think it was time to reveal it yet, as she felt it should be left till a much later time when the secret would have a proper context to be explained. After about 19 years, the sealed letter was opened in 1960, but it wasn't revealed until about 40 years later, in the year 2000. In the vision, she saw an angel with a flaming sword, and the flames flashed as though they would set the world ablaze. The angel was on the lady's left and held the sword in his left hand. The fury of the flames that emanating from the sword was swamped in the splendor of the lady's radiance from the direction of her right hand. At that, the angel kept shouting for penance, then an immense light appeared before them. She saw an image of someone who looked like the bishop, dressed in white, in immense light, similar to how people appear in a mirror when they pass in its front. From their knowledge, they had the presumption that the person was the Holy Father. Now, what they see next will shock you. Next, they saw various people of religious caliber and ranks, bishops, priests, men and women, all going up a steep mountain, and on it was a huge cross hewn from the trunks of a cork tree. As the father walked on in pain and sorrow, he walked through a big city that was half in ruins, and with trembling he prayed for the corpse he met on his way up the cross. On getting to the cross, a group of soldiers fired bullets and arrows at him, and he died. Similarly, all the other people were killed at the foot of the cross. Two angels standing beneath the arms of the cross held a crystal aspersorium, and they gathered the blood of those who were martyred in it, sprinkling their souls as they made their way to God. On the 13th of May, 1981, exactly 64 years after the first Marian apparition, an assassination attempt on the life of Pope John Paul II occurred. The perpetrator, Ali Agca, fired bullets at the Holy Father 4 times in a row. This later led to an intense 5-hour surgical operation in a bid to save the Pope's life. Yet as the Pope began to recover, he spoke from his hospital bed that he had forgiven the brother who struck him. It wasn't until 2 months after that the Pope was able to return home. Now, could this be the fulfillment of the third secret of Fatima? The Pope attributed his miraculous escape from the near-death experience to the kindness of the Virgin Mary. He visited the shrine of Fatima in Portugal the following year to present the bullet that almost took his life as a gesture of thanks. It was later welded into the crown of the Queen's statue, as it found an empty space at the union of the 8 stems that made up the crown. Some have attributed these miraculous events to be the fulfillment of the third secret of Fatima. As a matter of fact, the Vatican reported in year 2000 that everything concerning the third secret had been fulfilled. But guess what? It didn't end there. Later, Pope Benedict XVI shared profound insight into the third secret when he was a cardinal. Then Cardinal Ratzinger, he shared that there was no great mystery to be revealed, and neither was the future unveiled. Disappointing as these might seem when compared to the scary details of the revelation, he shared that the purpose of the vision wasn't to paint a picture of the future as one that could not be irrevocably fixed, but rather meant to mobilize the forces of change in the right direction. He further debunked the claim that the person who attempted to assassinate the Holy Father was acting based on a divine agenda. It also cleared the air about Ali Agar's lack of choice in the scheme of things, as some have assumed. He concluded that the vision focused on various dangers and how we might be saved from them. Authenticity of Marian apparitions. The Secrets of Fatima and the Apparition of Mary and Fatima is just one out of the many approved appearances of Mary recorded by the Catholic Church. While it's not impossible that some are fabricated, the Church undergoes a series of processes to evaluate their authenticity. A Marian apparition is first subject to evaluation by the bishop of the diocese where it occurred, and may also be subject to further evaluation according to the Vatican, with an assessment of the character and person of the person who claims to experience them. Now, let's explore some of the most popular apparitions. Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared in 1531 to Saint Juan Diego and asked that a church be erected in her honor.
Juan Diego, Tlashikaki nashakoyo Juantzin. Kampa intimowika.
Siwapile. Muchpotsine.
When he wasn't believed, she arranged flowers in his cloak on his fourth apparition experience. When he went back again to raise the petition, something interesting happened. The flowers fell off his cloak when he opened it, and the image of Our Lady could be seen on the fabric. A basilica now stands in Mexico City in her honor, and the image is still visible there. In another small French town, Saint Bernadette, a young boy received Marian apparitions 18 times. During those times, she would ask people to offer prayers and turn toward God. With her help, the young child also discovered a spring that could miraculously heal people. While she mostly appeared to people with a message, she appeared to Saint Joseph and Saint John in 1879 in the town of Knock. She appeared to them as they stood and prayed in the rain, sending a non-verbal message of peace and comfort to them. A spectacular appearance bearing a deep message to 3 children also happened in Kibeho, Rwanda. Within a space of 8 years between 1981 and 1989, she appeared to them thrice, asking them to pray the rosary thrice daily. She also told them that a tragedy was going to occur. Many believe that the 1994 genocide was the fulfillment of this prophecy. However, in her message to them, she made it clear that her message to them was for the world, not just for Africa or Rwanda alone. In the United States, Adele Bryce also experienced a Marian apparition in 1859, where she was told to pray that sinners would be converted and also teach children nearby about the Catholic faith. Another interesting Marian apparition occurred in 1973, exactly 56 years after her appearance to the Little Shepherds of Fatima. Sister Agnes Sasagawa received the message of Mary, calling the world to repentance and praying the rosary in Akita, Japan. Now this leads to the question, what is the significance of the Marian apparition in Fatima, and what truth has Pope Francis revealed on the third secret of Fatima? Pope Francis and the third secret of Fatima. The third secret of the Fatima reflects the breakout of wars and martyrdoms, and in some way, it seems Pope Francis has revealed some subtle truths about this third secret. He made it clear as he declared that World War III had begun in a piecemeal fashion when he condemned the attack on Paris in November 2015, and again in January 2023, he also made a call to put a stop to what was beginning to look like the start of the Third World War in different parts of the world. This clearly indicates the role of the Pope in the fulfillment of the third secret of Fatima. As Cardinal Ratzinger rightly said, the vision is an indicator of what we should do to enforce change in the right direction. This means it does not directly lay any emphasis on the role of a specific pope, such as Pope Francis, in the fulfillment of these prophecies. Rather, it may reflect the role of the papacy in enforcing change through its successive positions as the world nears its end. The prophecy reveals that the angels continue to cry penance beneath the arm of the cross. This reflects nothing truer as the number of Christian martyrdoms is on the rise. This evidence makes it clear that there is an ongoing war in the world which may be different from what we've seen in the First and Second World Wars. On separate occasions, the Holy Father, Francis, has made reference to the global wars, stating that it's happening in a piecemeal fashion. He charged his listeners with the need to stop the wars going on around us in places like Syria and Ukraine. Just like it was shown in the third secret of Fatima, he made it clear that wars hurt a lot of people, especially innocent young lives and old people. He shared that there is a need to put a stop to the wars to make the world a safe and happy place to live in. In his charge, he pointed out the need to establish reforms for the people who have been victims of war, for them to live happy lives again. With these, it becomes even clearer that the papacy is truly an agent of change in shaping a future for mankind as revealed in the third secret. Now that this secret has been revealed, what do we know about the fulfillment of other instructions of the lady? After the series of visions received by the children, Lucia later received another appearance of Mother Mary in 1929, when she received further parts of the secrets of Fatima. It was during this appearance that Senior Lucia again received the request that Russia should be consecrated to her Immaculate Heart. This revelation has led to continuous prayers requesting Mary's intercession for the conversion of Russia. This was done in 1942 by Pope Pius V during the Second World War. These continued to be a practice for succeeding popes, including Pope John Paul II and Pope Francis. The urgency and need to pray the Rosary for Russia was born from the rise of the Communist Party, which ultimately denied the existence of God, and the period of Joseph Stalin's reign, when he imprisoned and executed millions of people, including Christians. This consecration of Russia was at the heart of the world's peace, as the threat of annihilation remained evident in the face of Russia's nuclear weapons. When Archbishop Tadeusz Kondrusiewicz from Moscow visited Sister Lucia, she asked if he was openly practicing as an archbishop in the city, and when he replied yes, she replied that it meant that the prophecy of Fatima had been fulfilled. Now, the Archbishop has also shared that the statue of Our Lady of Fatima stands in every church in his country. With the fulfillment of this prophecy, what does this mean for the fulfillment of the third secret? Now that we've explored the Pope's position on the third secret of Fatima, what do you think about the revelation of St. Lucia and how it applies to our world? Do you think all the instructions have been met? Do you think there are deeper meanings in the context of these secrets? Do share with us in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more exciting videos.
We need to remember that we are followers of Jesus Christ, and his life, humanly speaking, ended in failure, the failure of the cross.
The resurrection of Jesus is the be-all and the end-all of the Christian faith. If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, all the Christian faithful ought to leave their churches immediately.
From the moment he stepped onto the balcony at St. Peter's Basilica in 2013, Pope Francis signaled that his papacy would be different. He chose the name Francis after St. Francis of Assisi to reflect his vision: humility, simplicity, and care for the poor. But beyond his humble demeanor, Pope Francis has consistently challenged age-old church traditions and interfaith dialogue.
Pope Francis says the Vatican will increase interfaith dialogue to help counter extremism and intolerance.
His recent teachings about Jesus have got billions of Catholics and Christians talking, causing many to wonder what exactly the Pope has revealed about Jesus that's caused such a stir. Join us as we examine the life and leadership of Pope Francis, the message about Jesus. Pope Francis is the 266th Pope of the Catholic Church, and from the very beginning, his papacy has been about more than just internal reforms within the Church. He's repeatedly spoken out on issues that impact the most vulnerable, showing a clear desire to bridge the gap between the Church and the world. He has been making waves since he took office in 2013 and is renowned for his fresh take on Christianity and his role as a kind-hearted preacher. His views have always stirred comments by the millions, but it is his comments about Jesus that's always been the centerpiece of controversy.
Pope Francis commit heresy. This accusation that the Pope has committed heresy. Heresy meaning teaching something that is contrary to our Catholic beliefs and faith.
Especially among opposing Vaticans. However, in light of his recent message, even his biggest fans were taken aback by his latest revelation. Recently, Pope Francis has been talking about what he calls the true nature of Jesus' death in several talks and sermons. This was especially clear during his Easter speech, where he shared his thoughts on Jesus' resurrection, an event Christians celebrate as Jesus rising from the dead.
Christianity is based on the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and we want to remind ourselves of it. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15 verse 14, "If Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain, and your faith is in vain."
While Pope Francis touched on God's constant presence, he also dropped some startling truths about Jesus that no one had thought of. It's not unusual for Pope Francis to make comments that unsettle more traditional Catholics. He's known for saying things that ruffle feathers, but this time even his critics and fellow Orthodox Catholics were caught off guard. His bold statements about Jesus' crucifixion made a lot of people rethink their long-held beliefs about Jesus. As you would expect from an Easter sermon, Pope Francis taught that Jesus knows everything about us, our weaknesses, our doubts, and our failures. Yet, he still reaches out to us, offering grace and forgiveness. The Pope connected this to Jesus' ultimate act of sacrifice on the cross, which he said wasn't just about a glorious victory, but also about humanizing the Lord Jesus. But here's where things took an unexpected turn. Pope Francis went on to challenge a deeply rooted belief about Jesus' crucifixion, and then dropped a startling statement. He said that the life of Jesus, humanly speaking, ended in failure, something he called the failure of the cross. Many in the Catholic world couldn't believe what they heard. Was the Pope really suggesting that Jesus' crucifixion was a failure? In fact, Pope Francis further explained that this failure was precisely the point.
What Pope Francis said was that the crux of it, if I could just summarize it in a sentence, was that Jesus was a failure. Jesus going to the cross, he failed.
He taught that Jesus experienced the deepest human suffering and abandonment, and yet through that, he offered the greatest gift, eternal life and forgiveness. This interpretation challenges the traditional view of Jesus' death as a triumphant event, and instead frames it as the ultimate example of humility and sacrifice. It emphasizes that true power doesn't come from avoiding suffering, but from facing it head-on with love, compassion, and forgiveness. The Pope's words resonated with many, especially those who felt abandoned or broken in their own lives. But for others, it raised questions. Is this a new direction for the Church? Doesn't this teaching undermine centuries of Christian teachings about the power of the resurrection? An even bigger surprise is that Pope Francis didn't shy away from these tough questions, urging believers to think more deeply about what it means to follow Jesus and to find hope, even in failure. This revelation from the Pope stirred discussions worldwide. It called on people to reflect on the nature of their faith, challenging them to see beyond the surface of religious traditions and delve into the heart of Jesus' message: love, humility, and the power of redemption in the face of human weakness. He shared that Jesus didn't die as a punishment for humanity's sins, but rather out of profound love and solidarity with the oppressed. According to Pope Francis, the crucifixion wasn't about punishment or wrath from an angry God, but rather Jesus showing the ultimate expression of love by standing with those who suffer. This teaching turned centuries of traditional understanding on its head.
Jesus isn't on the cross just taking our spankings. The Catechism of the Catholic Church tells us that it's love.
Why can such a polarizing figure in the faith be the centerpiece of global controversy? The answer to this lies in the approach of the papacy. Pope Francis's unique style of leadership is affecting different quarters differently, and we will now take a deep dive into how Pope Francis leads the Catholic Church. Style of leadership. According to Pope Francis, to live is to encounter. Pope Francis has emphasized that the key to understanding his papacy is to look at the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. Like Jesus, Pope Francis seeks to model a life of humility, inclusion, listening, forgiveness, and presence with those on the margins of society. Unlike past popes who lived in luxury, he chose to stay at the Vatican guest house instead of the opulent apostolic palace. He also dresses very modestly, showing he's not into fancy things or wealth while serving as pope. Pope Francis has been big on protecting the environment and treating everyone with kindness. He believes the church should welcome everyone, no matter their background. He's even tried to build bridges with non-Catholics to promote understanding. Some traditional Catholics have found his inclusive approach a bit controversial, especially since they see the church as a place for a select few. Pope Francis has never been one to shy away from pushing boundaries, even when it comes to the church's most sensitive issues. From the moment he stepped into the papacy, he began challenging long-standing traditions and encouraging open discussions on topics that had been considered off-limits for years. While he's open to modern ideas, Pope Francis has made sure to keep the core teachings of the Church. He's known for standing up for those in need and caring deeply about helping the poor.
Pope Francis reflected on the need to be fluent in the universal language of charity. He said all people, Christians and non-Christians alike, must try to help those in need, physically, mentally, and spiritually.
As he put it, some of the happiest people are those who have the least. His new perspectives have sparked debates about whether the Church should stick to its old ways or adapt to the modern world. Not everyone is on board with his fresh takes on the Bible and Jesus, and his papacy has played host to some of the dramatic reactions from even the clergy elders. Also, Pope Francis hasn't been shy about his views on capitalism. He's made it clear that people in poverty shouldn't be left out of the conversation. He's also said that obsessing over material stuff, like phones, cars, and money, pulls people away from God. He believes everyone should have equal opportunities and live in a fairer world where the rich and poor are on more equal footing. This idea really resonated with those who care about justice, but others felt he was leaning too much into communist ideas. Another point of interest about his style of leadership is in the modernization of the papacy and interpretation of the Bible, which we will examine later in this video. As a quick example, he's talked about the creation story from Genesis. In the beginning, there was darkness, and then there was light, as more than just a simple origin tale. He believes it's a powerful story that teaches us about our special relationship with God and our responsibility to care for the planet. According to him, digging deeper into these biblical stories can make their lessons more relevant today, but not everyone's on board. Some conservative folks think the Bible should be taken literally, without trying to uncover any hidden meanings. They worry that a deeper look might lead to changes in the Church's core beliefs. On the other hand, supporters of Pope Francis argue that exploring these deeper meanings can make the Bible's teachings more applicable to modern life. Pope Francis has faced the tough task of balancing traditional Catholic doctrines with a push for modernization. He encourages Catholics to look deeper into Bible stories, suggesting that they hold important lessons for today's world rather than just sticking to the surface-level text. Public contentions about Pope Francis's papacy. Pope Francis has stirred up quite a bit of controversy with some of his recent takes on the Bible. He has a simple approach of meeting people where they are, not where the Church says they should be, and this has been the bedrock of controversy both within the Vatican and beyond. One of his most talked about positions is his openness toward the LGBTQ+ community.